everyone. Thanks for joining me. My name is Eloise Drain, and I'm the founder of Family Inceptions. And I've also been a three-time surrogate, twins the first time, a boy the second time, and a girl the third time. And today I thought I'd share a little bit about my first experience in carrying twin pregnancy for my surrogacy journey. It was the first time that I've ever carried twins. I had four children of my own, and they were all singleton pregnancies, so I never really experienced what a twin pregnancy would feel like, and really wasn't anticipating that I was going to have twins. So I matched with my first set of intended parents independently. I did try to find a surrogacy agency. I lived in the Atlanta area, well, still live in the Atlanta area, and I was looking at the time for a surrogacy agency in the area, and there was none. And so I started looking for agencies outside of the area, but I really wanted to find a local family that I could carry for. And so I decided to then go find a person myself. I already had the knowledge and understanding, so I figured, okay, I can probably do this on my own. I found a couple local to me that I carried for, and the family, unfortunately, the intended mother had breast cancer, and right before she had to do her treatments, she ended up doing a round of IVF, and they were able to get 7 embryos out of her cycle. Well, and mind you, when we first started, this was back in 2007, 2008 timeframe. We did all of the things. I went through the screening. My husband went through screening. We had to complete a psychological evaluation. And then the intended parents and us also completed a joint consultation, a joint psych consultation. And then it was time to prepare for the embryo transfer. I took all the medication, and I had to do the progesterone injection. So I've been a donor before. I've taken the injection. So I really didn't think that it was going to be a big deal until the day that I actually had to take the progesterone injection. Well, as you can imagine, I was not prepared for an intramuscular shot. So, thinking that my husband could probably do it for me, I called him and was like, okay, you need to help me give me the shot. And he's like, yeah, I can't do it. He literally started like sweating profusely and just could not do it. So I had to pretty much do it myself. And it was difficult. It really was difficult that first day doing it myself. But after the first day, and I kind of got the hang of it, then I was able to do it myself. But if you come back to my next episode where I talk about journey number 2, I'll share with you about my progesterone injection mishaps. So make sure you subscribe and follow along so I can kind of just share with you of all of my shenanigans that I had to go through when I was doing my surrogacy journeys. Anyway, so we started the shots, and I was ready for our transfer. And the first transfer, they actually transferred 3 embryos. Now they do not do that anymore. There's probably a lot of clinics that don't even do double embryo transfers anymore. It's just single embryo transfers. But in some cases, people are still doing 2 embryo transfers at the max. But back then, they did 3 transfers. One took. I actually did get pregnant. And all was well. And then I went in for our 9-week appointment, and they could no longer find the heartbeat, which was devastating, obviously. And so I ended up having to have a DNC, and they were able to test the tissue from the fetus. And they found out that, unfortunately, it just had some issues, and it was just not going to be viable. Fine. So we attempted the second attempt. And the second attempt, this time, we transferred 4 embryos. And again, none of these things happen anymore. But we transferred 4 embryos, and unfortunately, none of them was successful. And so the third time comes around, and mind you, each time that you have to attempt a new transfer, you have to stop all medication. You have to allow everything to stop, get your cycle again, and then start over. So we did that, wasn't successful. The second time, started all over, did all the medication, had the transfer, wasn't successful. If you remember, the intended mother, they only had those 7 embryos, and she had started the chemo treatment, so it was not possible for her to do another round. So they did have to use donor eggs. And they did, and we transferred 2 embryos, and both took. And the beginning of the pregnancy, in the beginning, it was okay. But I would say after like week 8 of the pregnancy, and I don't know if it was because it was 2 in there, the medication, I don't know, but I've never had morning sickness with my own pregnancies, and this was of a different caliber of sickness. I was sick all the time, and not sick where I was throwing up sick, more sick of feeling nausea, but I couldn't actually ever get it out. And so it was so frustrating all the time. And it lasted probably until about week 17. I actually had to get medication from the doctor's office for the sickness because it was so bad. Like I could not keep anything down. But finally, come the second trimester, I was doing much better and feeling so much better. And, the intended parents were there at every doctor's visit. And after, sometimes after the doctor's visits, we would go out to lunch, or we would just, hang out or whatever. And I was working too up until that point. As a matter of fact, I was working at a company where people didn't even know that I was pregnant until I was 6.5 months pregnant. Nobody knew that I was pregnant. It wasn't that I was hiding it. It was just I didn't show, which was typical for me. I didn't show with my children. I would have thought, though, that with twins, I would have, but I didn't. So, some coworkers knew that I was pregnant, but it was for my thing. For me, it's none of your business. And, when you see a belly popping, then you can ask me questions. And when you ask me if I feel like telling you what it is, I will. And if I don't need to. I was actually working from home. It was on a Thursday, and Thursday night, at that point I was 34 weeks pregnant, and Thursday night, my water broke at 12:30 in the morning. Well, I had got up to use the restroom and then went back to bed and felt like I still needed to go again. And then I went back to the restroom, and then that's when my water broke. And I got up and I woke my husband up, and I told him, you need to take me to the hospital. My water broke. He's never experienced that before because with my son and my other children, my water just didn't break. Every time I had to get my water broken at the hospital. So it was even a surprise to me. Woke him up, and this fool, he decides that, what he sees on TV when somebody says their water broke. So he's running around, he's running downstairs, wanting to boil water and get towels. And I'm like, you're not delivering the baby. Just get dressed and take me to the hospital. I wasn't even having contractions at that point. And I'm like, I'm getting ready to go in the shower and look presentable because both of the babies' heads were down. So the thought was that we were going to deliver vaginally for both the girls since both of their heads were down. And I've never had a C-section before, as I mentioned. So I'm like, I know there's going to be people in the room, it's twins and all of that. And so I needed to make sure that I looked presentable, shake my legs and other parts of the body. So anyway, so I went, took a shower, got dressed, and then we headed to the hospital. Now, because it was at that point probably 1:30 in the morning, my husband took me to the hospital. I have older children, so we woke up my son, and at the time he was 14. I told him Dad is going to have to take me to the hospital. He'll be back to, get you guys ready for school. And so he took me to the hospital, got me all checked in, make sure that I was good. And then he had to leave to go back to get the kids. And plus, I already had 4. I knew what I needed to do. So I really didn't need his support there. And the intended parents, so we thought, were on the way. So when my water broke at 12:30 in the morning, of course, the first thing I did was I text the intended parents. And then by the time we were ready to leave, I still hadn't received a response back from the text. So I called, and then the phone went straight to voicemail. Oh, okay. They probably are sleeping, but I'm just going to keep calling, and I'll call both their numbers and see, hopefully somebody will answer. Well, I kept calling and nobody was answering, and I kept texting and nobody was responding. So I got to the hospital, and I'm still calling and I'm still texting. Now, remember, again, at this point, it's 1:30, 2:30 in the morning. So, people are in deep sleep at that point. And so I get to the hospital and they check me, and the lady was like, oh, well, I really don't see that your water broke. We may need to send you home. I'm like, yeah. No, that's not happening. I've delivered 4 babies already, and I know my water broke. It may not have broken with my children previously, but I know what it feels like when your water breaks, and my water broke. And Lars was like, well, I checked you, but there really isn't anything. And I was like, I really don't care if you see anything or not. Then you need to go find somebody who actually knows what they're looking for. And because I'm telling you, my water broke. She had an attitude with me, obviously. And so she went left and came, somebody else came back. At that point, it was a doctor on call or whatever. And then they checked me and they were like, yeah, actually, yeah, your water did break. I'm like, I know. Yeah. But remember, now I'm 34 weeks, and I wasn't feeling still any contraction. So they were like, well, we're going to have to check an ultrasound, make sure that both of the girls are still head down, and we're going to stop because evidently I was getting contractions, but I just wasn't feeling them. And they were like, well, let's just stop the contractions for now until we know what's happening, and then we'll come back and see if you need to be sent home, or if you're going to just be at the hospital. I'm like, well, my water broke. It's very unlikely that I'm going to be sent home. These girls are being born today. And she agreed with me, but she was like, let's just, out of abundance of caution. So we went, I had the ultrasound, both girls were head down still, and they were great and everything else. And the doctor was like, nope, we're good to go. So let's do it. They put me in the labor and delivery room. And at this point, it's probably about, I don't know, 9:30 in the morning. And no, the parents still haven't come. They haven't answered the calls, and they haven't responded to my text messages. And I need to go back a minute, because so remember I said my water broke Thursday morning, or should I say Friday morning, because it was like Thursday night. Wednesday of that week, same week, I actually had my doctor's visit. Of course, my parents were there, and the doctor asked the parents and said to the parents, like, hey, she's dilated 2 centimeters. She could go whenever time, you need to make sure everybody's ready to go and everything is good to go. Well, unbeknownst to me, it wasn't, and I'll tell you guys that story in a minute. They weren't ready. Actually, they told the doctor that Salvation Army was actually coming that weekend to come and pick up the stuff from their house so that they can then begin the nursery. Did I say I was 34 weeks pregnant with twins? Yeah. Okay. So back to labor. So I get back into the delivery, or the labor and delivery room. And this time, so that my contractions can begin going on and all of that, they gave me Pitocin, which I hate. I had to have it with all 4 of my other kids, but they gave me Pitocin, and contractions started coming. Wasn't bad, still, wasn't anything that was unbearable. And finally, I get a phone call from the parents, and they were like, oh my God, our phones, we turned off the phone. We just wanted a good night's sleep. And so we just turned off our phones. And I'm like, yeah, no, don't do that. When you have a surrogate who's, in her 3rd trimester, just don't do that. If you are an intended parent, don't do that. Okay. They finally said, okay, we're on our way. We'll be there within the next hour. And they were. and they got there. Of course, they were frazzled because they completely were not prepared yet. Did I say on Wednesday that they still hadn't even gotten the stuff out of the room that was going to be the nursery? So while we're sitting there waiting in labor and delivery, one of the intended parents is now running around trying to get all of this stuff organized because these babies are coming. So I went into labor, everything was great. And finally they were like, okay, you know what? Baby A is ready to come. We can start pushing, doing all of that. Did a couple of pushes. She was out. Well, baby B, when baby A came out, realized like, oh my God, I have all of this room now to myself. So I'm going to decide to move around and flip around. And that's what she did. She ended up flipping upside down. And at first my doctor was like, I'll try to turn her so that we can deliver her vaginally. That wasn't happening. They actually lost her heartbeat and they couldn't find it. And they were trying to find it and couldn't find it. And they got nervous and was like, oh my God, we're going to have to do an emergency C-section. After 40 minutes of just delivering baby A, I am being wheeled into the surgery room next door to have now a C-section. So I had one vaginally, one C-section within less than an hour of one another. And at that point, it was just me by myself in the room. I didn't have, my husband was at home with my kids. The intended parents, baby A just was born. And there was no time for them to get ready and everything else because they literally wheeled me in a rush to try to hurry up and get baby B because they couldn't find her heartbeat anymore. So when baby B came out, it was just pretty much her and I, the doctor and the nurses. And I heard, you know, she was like, she's out. And then I'm like, oh my God, is she okay? Because I didn't hear her crying. And then within like 2 seconds of saying, is she okay? Then I heard her screaming and I just like kind of breathed a sigh of relief. And I got to see her. I couldn't touch her. Obviously I was on the table, but I did get to see her and be the first one to put my eyes on her, which was amazing. And it's still, just thinking about it, just still touches me all these years later. So yeah. The intended parents were told that baby B was born and she was doing well, and they wheeled her out and they got me set up and then put me in the recovery room. And parents came, saw me, wanted to see how everybody was doing. Everybody was great. And then they put me in my room. And funny enough, though, with that particular pregnancy, I craved, and everybody has these weird cravings that they say when they're having a pregnancy. I craved cantaloupes. I don't know why. I have no idea. Now I can't stand eating it. I used to love it, but now I don't. I had to have a whole cantaloupe to myself every single day for months, every single day, whether it was sweet, whether it wasn't sweet, it didn't matter. I just had to have a cantaloupe. I don't know why a cantaloupe. I have no idea. But yeah, I had to have a cantaloupe. So the running joke for my intended parents is when they came to visit me, they brought me 2 huge cantaloupes that after I had the girls, I was like, oh God, I can't even look at that thing anymore. And all was well, but, and here is where the story of the intended parents not being ready. So when you are typically around 20 weeks of pregnancy in a surrogacy pregnancy, the attorney for the intended parents usually should begin a parental order to establish the parents as who should be on the birth certificate. And again, it normally stops at around 20 weeks of pregnancy. Well, this time, unbeknownst to me, my intended parents, the attorney did send them all of the paperwork and everything else, but they sat on it. They actually didn't submit the paperwork in. So when the girls were born, as far as the hospital was concerned, I was the responsible parent, the responsible party, and the parent as far as they were concerned. So the baby's bracelets were on me, not the parents. And in order for the parents to see the babies, because they did actually have to go to NICU for 6 days, they actually were breathing fine on their own and everything else. They just needed to learn how to feed. But the parents had to get permission from me in order to go see their daughters in NICU because the hospital wouldn't give them any rights and wouldn't allow them to see the children because there was no parental order showing that they were the parents. And I was pumping breast milk for them as well. And obviously, I'm in the hospital and I pumped for them, and I wanted to bring the milk to them to obviously go see them. So I did, and I went up to NICU, and there was a nurse who didn't know that I was a surrogate. Went and said, "I'm here to see so and so and so and so." She was like, "Oh, great. Can I see your bracelet?" And she looked at my bracelet, and then she looked back, and she's looking again. She's looking back, and I could see the confusion on her face because the babies that I carried for was for a white couple. Clearly, I am not a Caucasian person. So she's keeps looking back and everything, and I finally knowing, and I figured out why she was like looking so perplexed. I was like, "Oh, I was a surrogate." She's like, "Oh, that makes so much more sense." So I went, saw the girls. They looked great. They were doing wonderful. And then while I, you know, got back downstairs, and then I got a phone call from the hospital's billing department that wanted to speak to me because our insurance at the time was very, very good. Not only did my insurance pay for the prenatal and the delivery care, my insurance also covered the medications that I needed for preconception, the ultrasounds, the doctor's visits. That's definitely not common anymore, but it did happen with my insurance. So my intended parents did really get a good deal with my insurance, and we had no idea. And so, sure, I don't care, let's use it. And so I get a call from the billing about my insurance that one of the intended parents had asked if they could keep the girls on my insurance since my insurance was better than their insurance. If that was the case, that they had to then keep my last name because obviously if they're not my children, then they can't stay on my insurance, but they would have to be my children or have at least my last name in order to be. And I'm like, no, 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 no. It was one thing to use the insurance for my care, whether it was a prenatal or delivery, even though it was their pregnancy, not okay for after the babies were born and using my insurance. We had to get that situation resolved. And there was a little bit of words back and forth or whatever, but it was resolved, no big deal. A couple of days later, I went home, and then I started feeling like a weirdness to my face. Then my husband told me that he started seeing like my eyes were droopy and my mouth was droopy. Well, I ended up getting Bell's palsy, where a portion of my face was paralyzed. I don't know if it was the shock of having a vaginal delivery and a C-section within an hour of each other. I have no idea, really. Nobody knows. But I get Bell's palsy for 30 days. Yep. And even after all of that, I still go and do this again 2 more times. But I get Bell's palsy, and my doctor felt that, okay, it should hopefully go away just how it came on, and it did, thank God. After the Bell's palsy, I was able to actually go and visit the intended parents and the babies in their home and see how they were doing. And I also had more breast milk and stuff that I was bringing, but then I was also started getting medical bills that had not been paid. So I brought all the bills copies to the intended parents. Was like, okay, this needs to get paid, because obviously it was in my name, but it was their medical bills. And they're like, yeah, we'll take care of it or whatever. After the girls were a month or two, I would resend the bills, and then all communication stopped. I didn't get any more communication. They didn't respond back to my emails. They didn't call me back. And these medical bills are still piling up and nobody is paying them. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? It's not like it's a whole lot of bills. Thank goodness my insurance covered a lot. But why are these bills still outstanding? Well, 6 months go by. I never heard back from them again. And I still have these outstanding bills. So I had to sue my intended parents for them to pay them outstanding medical bills and the final balance that was actually due to me. It is not a way that you want to end your surrogacy journey. It was so beautiful and it was so wonderful. And, I just thought that it was the best thing ever. And then it ended with that. And it still to this day, and it's been years and years and years, obviously, but it's still very disappointing. And it's definitely one of the reasons why I, with escrow, with our surrogates and them having any bills that they need to be, that's in their name that needs to be covered by the intended parents, like you have no idea. Like literally, I go insane to make sure that these bills are taken care of. I'll just as soon as quickly take it out of my pocket than have a surrogate have anything in her name that's not her bill, that she's going to be responsible for. No, no, not happening on my watch. So anyway, um, but and I don't like to end a video with, oh, I had to sue my intended parents, but I did, and then it's the truth. But I also know, though, that it's not a common thing, thank God, especially when you're working with the surrogacy agency. Working with a reputable surrogacy agency, they have escrow money or escrow, and money is put in there to help cover all of the expenses and cover all of the bills. That is, in a nutshell, what my experience was like with my first surrogacy pregnancy. And I didn't even go into detail throughout the entire pregnancy. It really was very routine. Luckily, with the twin pregnancy, besides the beginning 17 weeks of the morning sickness, and then, of course, in the end with the Bell's palsy, it wasn't that bad. So thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it, but I would love for you to subscribe so that you'll know when I leave in the next video for my experience with journey number 2, and then my ultimate experience with journey number 3, where it all came to an end for me. So stay tuned, subscribe, like, and share, and I will talk to you soon.